Okay, so you were sprinting and you pulled your hamstring. You were running and you felt a big pull in the back of your leg. It stopped you right then and there and you knew you had to shut it down for the day. That sucks, but I'm here to help. I'm gonna tell you exactly what you need to do to fix it and get back to sprinting. Let's go and dive into it. We're gonna cover the 3-phase approach that you need to take to get back to full sprinting and playing your sport again. As a physical therapist and strength coach, I've worked with a lot of athletes. I'm gonna help you filter down the information about the hamstring so you can figure out exactly what exercises you need to do to get back on track fast. Chances are you pulled your hamstring muscle during top speed sprinting. That's because during sprinting, your hamstring has roughly 5 times the amount of force through it as it does during jogging. These very high forces can cause a tear to one of the hamstring muscles. The most common hamstring muscle to tear is the biceps femoris, which goes from the back of the hip down to the outside of the knee. The second most common one to tear is the semitendinosus, more towards the inside of the leg. In about 1 in 3 cases, multiple muscles are involved. About 60% of the time, you'll feel the pain higher up towards the back of the hip. You might feel it right underneath your glute. And about 40% of the time, the pain will be a little bit lower down towards the knee. Regardless though, the rehab process will look similar. We're going to progressively load the hamstring muscle and progressively build back up to running full speed. Okay, let's figure out what grade of hamstring strain you have. Grade 1 strain is very mild. If you activate your hamstring by pulling back and contracting that muscle, you might have a little bit of pain, but it's not significant pain. You can walk normally and your hamstring is still strong. Typically with a grade 1 strain, you can be back to full sprinting in about a week. Next, we have a grade 2 strain, and this is a bit more moderate. You're gonna have more pain with contracting the hamstring and more weakness. You're also likely going to see some swelling and have pain walking for the first few days. With a grade 2 strain where we have loss of strength and maybe a 25 to 50% tear of that muscle, we would typically expect around 4 to 6 weeks for a rehab process to get back to full sprinting. And then lastly, we have a grade 3 strain, which is the most severe. This is gonna have the most pain, a lot of swelling, discoloration in the back of the leg, and we would expect this grade of strain to take 6 weeks or longer to get back. Most of you are gonna have a grade 2 strain, that's most common. That's what we're gonna base our timelines off of. All right, so now let's go ahead and get into our 3-phase approach to building back up to full sprinting. We're gonna start with phase 1, and this is going to be isometric based. That means that most of our exercises in this phase are going to be in static positions. If you just pulled your hamstring yesterday or the day before, then I would recommend waiting 1 to 3 days before you start. After about 3 days, you should be able to walk fairly normally without pain and contract your hamstring a little bit. So that's a good indication that you're ready to start with these exercises. The first exercise that we're going to recommend is the long lever bridge. This is a great exercise because it's going to challenge your hamstrings more so than your glutes. You may be familiar with a glute bridge, which is more of a 90-degree knee bend, but we're gonna actually extend the heels out farther away from your butt to make this more hamstring dominant. Remember, we wanna introduce low load that's tolerable to the hamstring here early on to help that healing process start. The amount that we wanna do on this is about 3 sets of 30 seconds. The goal here is to go just far enough out with your knees that you're maybe in a little bit of pain, but it's less than 3 out of 10 pain level. As long as we're keeping 1 out of 10, 2 out of 10, maybe 3 out of 10 pain level, then we're gonna be progressing well here and not introducing too much load, but also not underloading. So we're gonna bridge the hips up, hold for 30 seconds, feeling that hamstring working, and then we'll rest for about a minute in between sets. That'll be our first exercise. We're gonna do those 3 sets. Next, we're going to get into a hip hinge called a Romanian deadlift. This is where we're going to take 2 dumbbells, or you could use a barbell as well, but we're going to hinge at the hips, pushing them back, and then just work down to about knee level. When we're very early in the rehab process, we want limited hip flexion. We don't want to be going into deep hip flexion with deep step-ups, deep squats, or deep leg presses. We want to wait on those exercises and just do these exercises where we're in shallower hip flexion, but still challenging the hamstring muscle. A good starting point here is 3 sets of 10 repetitions with a moderate load that you can do with 3 out of 10 pain or less. Phase 1 typically lasts for 1 to 2 weeks, and over that 2-week period, you want to be doing these exercises every other day. While both the long lever bridge and the Romanian deadlift start with 2 legs, Over the course of that 2 weeks, you can start to work into a single leg on both of those exercises. Typically, somewhere in the first 2 weeks, we can start back to running. You're gonna have to figure out when you feel comfortable with this, but we want a really easy starting point of jogging for just 20 meters. We want to do this 3 times at less than 50% of your running speed. So this should just be a really slow jog back and forth. If you can alternate between doing strength training, running, strength training, running, strength training, running, then I think that'll be a really good process for building back up. Okay, now let's go ahead and get into phase 2. This is typically around the 3 to 4 week mark, but again, this will be different for everyone. In this phase, we can get into deeper levels of hip flexion now. So we're gonna start with step ups. I recommend starting with something like a 12-inch box and then building up over time here. I think you should do these weighted and you should shoot for 4 sets of 8 repetitions. You should do these with moderate weight that is challenging but doesn't push you to beyond 3 out of 10 pain, and I want you to increase the height of the step each time as tolerated. Some other things that would be great for phase 2 would include a leg press or a machine hamstring curl if you have access to those. These are great exercises to progressively load that hamstring muscle, and 4 sets of 8 is a good target. Lastly, if you have a sled, pushing a sled for 4 sets of 10 to 20 yards is a really great exercise in phase 2. We want to continue to progress our running, and ideally in phase 2, we're building up to around 80%. Again, we want to just be gradual here, so we started around 50% speed, 60%, 70%, 80%. I would focus on being really consistent about that running, so you're 80%, 4 sets, 3 times a week. Again though, modify based on your individual needs. All right, now we'll progress into phase 3, which is typically around that 4 to 6 week point. This is where we're gonna introduce more intense exercises and also faster exercises. The first one that I recommend is the Nordic hamstring curl. This exercise is great for overloading that hamstring muscle. Find a way to anchor your feet down. You can do this with a partner, or you can do this by setting up a barbell and wedging your feet underneath of it. But the goal here is to, in a slow and controlled way, go forward until you can't control that hamstring contraction anymore, and then you'll fall forward. It can be tempting to have a ball rollout or a band for assistance here, and that's okay if you want to start there, but I would really recommend working to that breaking point, because that's where you're going to get that really strong peak muscle contraction that's going to get you prepared to get back to sprinting. A good target for that hamstring curl is working up to 4 sets of 6 repetitions. Some other good exercises for phase 3 include a fast sled push, skipping exercises like power skips or A skips, as well as slider eccentric single leg hamstring curls. And then really important is continuing our running progression. We were at 80%, then we want to progress to 85, to 90, to 95, and eventually back to 100% sprinting. Again, I can't emphasize enough, be consistent here, 3 times a week, hitting your 4 to 5 sets and building up over time. Inconsistent sprinting volume is actually one of the main causes of hamstring strains in the first place. That's why you'll see a lot of professional athletes wearing that catapult device that actually tracks with GPS how much sprinting they're doing each week. And they'll add sprints to players who aren't playing a lot, so that way their sprinting volume stays really consistent from week to week. When we take 2 weeks off of sprinting and then we get back, that's often when we do have hamstring strains. If that was your case, let me know in the comments below. If you're building back up to a specific sport, let me know in the comments below, and if I have any tips, I'll try to share those with you. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe so you don't miss any future videos, and we'll catch you in the next one. Thanks.